All right, it's going to be a super nerd fest today. I am so excited because I feel like I've never even met this guy, but I feel a kinship, a connection, because I think we're around the same age. Maybe I get a youthful feeling about this gentleman. But this guy's eaten up with fishing. I'm eaten up with fishing. I can tell we have kind of a similar path in life. This is Dan Spengler. I want to make sure I got your last name spelled correctly. Mine is a little weird too, Underdahl. Is that right, Spengler?
Yep, Spengler.
Perfect. Well, he is the senior project manager of hard baits and terminal tackle at Berkley, and I have been kind of like bothering Dan for a while through Instagram. I've wanted to talk with him. Berkley has stepped up their game unbelievably on all levels, and I'm just so excited that he's taken the time to talk with us today. Let's get this podcast rolling.
This isn't another fishing podcast. This is another fishing podcast.
First and foremost, man, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I know that you are a busy man, and like Berkley has their hard baits. You guys, what you've done with your hard baits is so impressive. I have been a fan of Berkley since I was a little kid. I mean, Berkley was probably the company that really helped to ignite my passion for fishing. I was using, I've always used Berkley Trilene. I'm a Berkley Trilene guy. Back in the day, I was using Berkley Strike on all my lures. And then I learned about Berkley Power Bait in a quarry in southern Minnesota that had smallmouth in it. And I saw firsthand that Power Bait it's not a gimmick. It is the real deal. I saw smallmouth. They were like, I'd throw out just like a regular worm, and they were super finicky. They were like, no, not really into it. Water was super clear. And then I put on a Berkley, this is like the worm, the power worm, the 7-inch Berkley power worm. It was motor oil color. I was 17 years old. The air temperature was 77 degrees. There was a light wind out of the northwest. I remember like it's, yesterday. I'm kind of making that part up. But it was like, it made such an impact to see that, and even the smell, I opened up the packaging and I was like, wow, that smells like nothing I've ever smelled before. And that experience, seeing how different that those smallmouth reacted to that power worm as compared to a regular worm, it was a night and day difference. And I started catching smallmouth in that quarry. And so from that day forward, number one, I've been in love with Berkley. And I'm not trying to here's the other thing. It might sound like I'm trying to get free product. I don't need any free product. I'm not trying to get free product, Dan, I promise. I know a guy at Lowrance. He's like the big wig at Lowrance. I've never asked him for anything. He's just my buddy. He's been on the podcast before. So just so you know, this is genuine here. Yeah, and so sorry, I have to switch cameras. This is a one-man show right here. So that's what I'm doing with this mouse. I'm switching cameras between you and me. But so that experience really made me fall in love with the company. I mean, I had, when you guys were making high-end rods, which I hope you guys start making high-ends like Berkley rods again, because I was in love with your rods. I had like the Berkley Air, the Berkley Series 1, the Pro Series. I love those rods. And so that's why I'm, that gives you kind of a synopsis, I guess, of why I am so excited to talk with you, because you know, as far as like Berkley's been known for their soft baits, the power bait lineup is incredible, but Lord have mercy, you have put together a hard bait lineup that is just absolutely stupid. So congratulations. Tell me exactly, is it you, do you have a team behind you?
Right.
What's going on there?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I've been here for 13 years, but it's a complete team effort. We have some of the most creative individuals assembled to me in terms of the fishing tackle industry out there today. So I look at it, we have CAD designers, we have fisheries guys. That was my former background. I got my master's degree in fisheries at South Dakota State University. So I came here with a fisheries background, and I used to design and develop my own lures when I was started when I was 9 years old. I started with a paper clip, a bullet weight, an Indiana blade, a clevis, threw it all together, added a treble hook, made an inline spinner, and that kind of set it off for me. I've been fishing since I was a kid, but we have chemists, we have physicists that used to work here. I remember this one guy, Roger Cook. He was the guy who was the line chemist when I first came here back in 2010. And if you've ever watched the show The Big Bang Theory, that was what it was like going into that guy's office, right? He had the formulas all over the wall, and I couldn't, he's way smarter than me. So, but, kind of one of those guys who helped this company invent Fireline. So,
right on.
Really, really cool. Lots of, like I said, there's mentors, John Prochnow, my boss, Keith Ostrom. I mean, you name it, down and down the line. We have a solid team, R&D, brand team, all the way to the top. And I think we have some of the best in the industry in bringing forth everything from the concept to the design. But what I do specifically, all the way from the concept through the design phase, the hands-on prototyping, the color development, all the way till the product gets on the shelf, I get to have the opportunity to work on that all the way from the idea to the end. So, products like, this Berkley Stunna, from the ground up, we built this bait with guys like Hank Cherry. We bring pros in, or we use the Berkley Labs approach. Like, we'll get into this bait, it's coming out here, the new Berkley Dime. There's a lot to talk about, but I really liked how you touched upon your background with the intro. I got so many stories to tell. We'll never be able to tell them all, but just a little background when you talked about the power bait and fishing the power bait when you were growing up, that really connected with me because the same with me. I grew up bank fishing with my buddies. I grew up in a small town in Northwest Iowa, Ocheeden. And all that there was to do, 400 people in this town, was ride your bike around or go fishing, right? So I had a group of buddies that we started fishing, and my parents would take me out to the local gravel pits, ponds. We would fish with like live night crawlers, and you'd throw the bait out there, your line would pull tight, and you caught the fish. It was pretty easy, right? It wasn't until I was at a seminar, a fishing seminar, this guy gave me a pack of power worms. He's like, hey, try these. My dad actually snuck me out of school that day, by the way, to go to the seminar. That was a great move.
Yeah, good dad.
Yeah, right. That was the best thing ever. And so I get this pack of power worms. I'm with my buddies. We ran out of night crawlers. I'm like, hey, I'm going to try one of these night crawlers or one of these power worms. And I'm telling you, man, I threw it out there, and the same thing as a live night crawler. Let it sink slowly to the bottom. I think I just had just a weightless hook on there. Line pulls tight. Obviously the fish bit the bait and was swimming with it in its mouth. It didn't spit it out. It ate the bait, set the hook, and that just continued to happen every time I used it. So proved itself to me very early on in life. And, I think in 5th and 6th grade, I was always here at the outlet store. I mean, I lived 25 minutes to the west. I was over here all the time getting baits. One interesting thing is we had this girl, so I tell people this story. So on riding the bus to school, there would be this girl, her mom worked at the factory. She would get the bulk bags of power bait, right? She would sell it for like $3 a bag. Like, I don't know. She was kind of like a drug dealer, but the power bait dealer on the bus. So my buddies and I, we were buying this stuff. Oh, yeah, here's $3. We had it, but we didn't all have the same stuff, but we wanted each other's baits, right? It was who first come, first serve, get to the baits. That's mine. I want that one. But so we ended up in my mom's basement. We'd have the group of guys come over, and we invented a thing called power poker for power baits. So, instead of playing for money, we played for power baits, and we had all the different baits, and whoever won, winner take all, right?
Looking through your Instagram and just kind of doing some research about you before this podcast, I'm like, yeah, he is a super fishing nerd. We're going to hit it off. I mean, it's just like, it's fantastic. I totally get it. And it's fun. It's fun. This is what's so fun about being in the industry, because you meet other people that are just eating up, with it as much as you are. And then just the fact that you're in the industry, you're making these baits, you're having an impact. I think too, what's exciting is that, there's this younger generation that's coming up. I always was a bit frustrated. I kind of feel like we're living in the golden age of fishing. There's so many good things happening right now. The youth involvement, it's like cool to fish. I always thought it was cool to fish, but in school, I was growing up in California, and I had to act like I was surfing and wear like volleyball shirts and stuff. I mean, it wasn't cool, but now just to see the involvement, like how, like it's like finally, yes, people are seeing how cool it is. It's like the lure aspect of it. What you're doing is such a huge part of the cool factor. Designing a bait, and I'm sure that's why we'll get into like how what was it like, why you started like designing baits. But I think I probably know it's just the fact of like creating something that's fooling a fish in the water, in the sense of just the accomplishment of that, and the pride in that, and just Absolutely. The amazing thing that you were able to trick another living creature, into biting. All of that stuff, when you are passionate about fishing, when it's just like, and I see these young kids, man, I'm seeing young kids just around here, my neck of the woods, little, young kids riding their bicycles to their lake, and they've got like equipment now that's like specifically designed for young kids riding their bikes to the lake.
I wish I had that when I was younger. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
so
you're right. I do think it is trending. Like, you see a lot of young guys out fishing now. It's cool. It wasn't cool when I was in school. The girls made fun of all the guys who fished. It wasn't that wasn't the thing that you were supposed to do, I guess. But now it's cool. And you got flat brim hats, and you have cool techie lures, cool techie rods and reels. Your boat's cool. Everything about fishing is cool. And then you wrap it up on social media, and it's this awesome activity. So I think it's really awesome to see what fishing has become.
I agree. And I think people like yourself, we're probably, are you Generation X? Would you consider? Are you I don't want. I guess we shouldn't. I'm probably much older than you are.
84.
You were born in 1984.
Right.
Oh, you were just a baby. I feel like, first of all, I just feel like I'm. I feel like I'm. So I'm not married. Or well, I'm married, but we don't have any kids. So I feel like a permanent. Kind of like a permanent college kid in a lot of respects. I feel like I don't feel like I'm quickly approaching 50, which is the case, which is shocking to me. So I feel like I'm much younger than I really am, which is anyway.
I wouldn't have guessed 50.
Yeah, well, I'm quickly approaching. But my point is that like it seems like there's been people, like younger people, getting into higher positions in fishing that are making an impact on fishing, and you're seeing it right now. Like yourself is a prime example. Like people that got eaten up, that are younger, got eaten up with it, and that are really kind of responsible, I think, for making it cool. I want to say, now it's not really the case because I am approaching 50, but I still feel young. I want to say that maybe, in some small part I've helped, with my video production and, stuff. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think that there's this, the popularity of fishing, this the younger generations that have gotten now into, higher up positions are designing lures, are making bigger decisions in fishing. I just, when I first got into the industry, which is 2000, I guess, I got a job out of college in the Bass Pro Shops. And even there, like, I could see, I've been shooting for 6 days on the Saginaw Bay. I just got done. So if I seem a little fried, it's because I am. Yesterday, actually, the day before yesterday, I was with Van Dam filming his very last tournament ever.
That's amazing.
And it was, honestly, it was so emotional, and also, like, it was, the waves were so big. I feel like I'm still in recovery mode. Yeah. So I apologize if I'm going off on weird tangents and doing, I
love it.
It was quite an experience, man. So
I feel like that's the same as me, man. I'll take you one direction, and I have, like, again, you got so many things to talk about, right? And I could literally tell you 20 different stories from this year, or I could tell you 100 of, little stories of how I got here, whichever way you want to go, man.
Yeah. So I've got to remember why I initially went on this strange rant. But I guess my point is that, I think what's going to happen is that I've always had a dream of fishing, bass fishing becoming a mainstream. As I've gotten older, I don't follow bass fishing like I used to, when I was younger. But I still, I still, obviously I'm eating up about fishing, and I'm a multi-species angler more than just specifically competing in bass tournaments anymore. But I think, what's going to happen, or I hope what's going to happen, is that all of these anglers these young anglers that are so eaten up with fishing right now, they're going to start getting into, positions in the industry, and it's just going to keep on raising the bar. It's just going to keep on making the industry better. Because when I got out of college and started working for Bass Pro Shops, there was even at Bass Pro Shops in corporate, there was some ignorance there, So I don't know why I initially started this this rant, but it's a common rant. I've done this rant before, but I think it's exciting to see the youth in it, and it's just almost like snowballing, because the lures are just so much more detailed, and the hooks are sharper. Everything is just so much more dialed. Oh, yeah. And so it's just making it more interesting for young anglers, and I think it's just creating more of them,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think things have gotten really techy. My goal here when I first came here, and then of course I was hired to come and design hard baits, and terminal tackle came on later on, but that was my number one thing is, when I came here, is to design hard baits for Berkley and eventually some of the other companies, but primarily Berkley, was personally to elevate the level of what the Berkley hard bait was. When I came here, there was two baits on the shelf, a Flicker Shad 5 and a Flicker Shad 7. Now there's all kinds of baits. There's tons of walleye baits, tons of bass baits. To be honest, probably the most rewarding thing that could have happened out of all of it is meeting a lot of cool pro anglers. I've met some really great people. Man, I can name a million of them. Like Gary Parsons, I saw you did a podcast with him, got to shoot a show with him that went on the Discovery Channel. I've been able to go places I never thought I would ever get to go, right? Edwin Evers, the list goes on and on. We just did a frog with Bobby Lane, the Stunna with Hank Cherry. I mean, literally, it just keeps going on and on. But I just, that's one of the coolest things, to be able to work with these guys. And honestly, I don't know what is more technical, the walleye side or the bass side. You talk to a bass guy, they think they're the most technical, right? In fishing lures. And you talk to the walleye guy, and you hear the same from them and how they break down a lake. And honestly, I see both sides of it. It's really cool to see, like, this is how Edwin Evers breaks down the water, or Hank Cherry, and this is how Gary Parsons or Keith Cavice or Corey Sprengel break down the water. And I've learned a lot from these guys. I started, again, when I was like 9 years old, designing my own baits. And then I started taking little sticks and things in the backyard that fell out of trees and carving them with my pocket knife. And I would test the actions in a horse tank. And my whole goal is to make a bait wiggle, like the baits you would buy in the store. And the day that I was able to make a bait out of wood wiggle in that tank was like one of the greatest things in my life. I was like, oh my God, look, I did it. But it looked terrible, by the way. It was so bad, but it wiggled, you know? And so I worked on then making topwater baits, other baits that wiggled. I caught some fish on them, even though they were terrible looking. They didn't look like a fish at all. I caught some fish on them, and I continued to do that through high school and into college. So I went and did all that, did the college stuff, got my fisheries degrees, but I continued to build baits, and I ended up probably making over 150 different hard bait designs. I wanted everything to be unique, different, creative ideas. I would fish all these baits, and then I'd kind of take those ideas and put them into the baits I made them. I made them by hand. Everything was out of a block of wood. Every vision of that bait came from my head, and I had a Dremel tool and some whittling tools, and every time I could basically get the shape that was in my head that I was thinking about during classes. I could get that done, and then I would test them. Well, at SDSU, I had an apartment, so I tested them. In the winter, I would test them in my bathtub, and then I would test them on the water in the lakes when that opened up. Up north, it's frozen for half the year, right? So that's what I did, and, it was cool. So then, honestly, when I first got this job opportunity, I actually was driving. I just went to a state-level biologist position interview out in the state of South Dakota. As I was driving back, about 5 minutes before they called me and offered the job, that I got the state-level biologist position out there, Dr. Keith Jones from Pier Fishing called me. I acquired here, right? Mm-hmm. And I read his book as part of my, my thesis and all that, how to, research fishing lures and make better baits and all that. So he calls me. He's like, hey, how would you like to design hard baits and spinner baits for Berkley? Would you like to come in and interview? And I'm like, oh my God, yes. So then I get a call 5 minutes later, and they ask me if I want the South Dakota job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I've never been in this situation. Nobody's getting biologist jobs at that time. That's a hard thing to crack, to get in that biologist world. It's a popular thing, right? Everybody wants to do it. So I had to actually tell them I couldn't accept, and I had to go try to get this position at Berkley. So I got the interview here. I went through 2 interviews. I actually had turned the job down and took a huge risk with the state level biologist, and I didn't have this job yet. I just felt like the connection was there, because when I brought my baits in during the interview. Yeah, so they're like, wow, you're hands-on.
Right. So how did you go from what? So you're a fisheries biologist, or that's what you want to be. So you have a degree in fisheries biology. So how did you, how is Berkley interested in you? What?
Right. Well, I'll say, Dr. Keith Jones.
I understand why Berkley, fisheries biologists, that makes sense to Berkley with a very scientific company. Right. But as far as lure design, how did they know that this guy that wants to be a fisheries biologist, how did they know that he could design lures?
They didn't. I sent him my information, and, my research background, I think, spoke for itself. A technical background, my thesis, I actually ran a thesis and several other side projects at SDSU. So I did the reproductive endocrinology of largemouth and smallmouth bass. So characterizing sex steroid hormones in their bloodstream annually, and how it relates to how the time the fish spawn based on temperature and photo period, and
Did you date much in college?
I did, but it was It was about research, and I spent the time to do that, and I had a bunch of side projects. I didn't probably get as much free time as I wanted, but every time I got free time, I was building baits and fishing.
Yeah.
So that was the side hobby. Everybody was playing like college, grad office softball. I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go fishing,
Right
and
on.
we did that stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of where that went, and
So he basically he saw the passion like that you had for, you basically
right.
put all that into a resume.
I did, and I said I built my own lures if you want to see them, and I sent him some pictures in an email, and I think that helped, and being able to relate how. So think of fish biology, and you think about fish behavior, and you're also fish your whole life, so you can interrelate the biology and the fishing element and the design element, which I just picked up on my own. I never was taught how to design fishing lures. I'm 100% self-taught in terms of what I came here with. Now, that doesn't mean that I think the team that I have, the people above me, help mentor me for this position and to be able to develop baits for the market. And that's definitely takes people of an incredible talent level to be able to make baits for the market. But I think it helped that I could make my own baits and think about how baits worked and how fish relate to baits. So I would think about the motions of the baits, and then I'd think about how the fish relate. I'd go on the water, I'd field test them. So in my interview, I think one of the best things I would have said is that in the end, it's about the action of the bait that you build into the bait, because fish respond to different actions differently. And in the end, you let the fish tell you. They have the final say, right? We as humans, we can't say, oh, this is the best bait ever. Power bait, it's delicious, right? No, it's not how it works. The fish do that. So when you look at the Berkley Research Lab facility, oh my gosh, I got to get into this and geek out, right? There's our laboratory here where power bait was born, right? Back in the 80s. They have aquariums set up with individual fish, and they actually have a pellet test where we can actually take a blank pellet with no scent, competitor attractants that have been on the market for years, and then our power bait formulas, including new versions of power bait formulas, right? We're always concocting the next thing to make our stuff better, right? That's how like Gulp and Maxent were born, right? It didn't just stop at power bait. We're constantly using science from fish biologists, by the way. They're the guy who does those tests in the back is a fish biologist. And so we have
awesome
fish, and that's where the fish biology plays a role. And Dr. Keith Jones, I'm circling back here. Dr. Keith Jones knew all that, and he related it to that. So that and chemist John Prochnow, the two fathers of Gulp and power, right?
Yep.
These two chemists and a fish biologist, and then obviously marketing and other trades engineers came together to build these products. But that's the cool thing about what we can do here with research. So you drop the pellet, the inert pellet, the no attractant fish pellet. They as soon as they suck it in, they can tell it's not a favorable food item. They spit it out faster than you could even set the hook. The competitor attractants, a lot of them at times you heard they were oil based. Fish actually don't have the ability with their chemoreceptors to perceive the oil. The molecules are too loud. Think of their little chemoreceptors for taste and smell to be a keyhole, right? The oil globules are bigger than the keyhole. They don't fit in. So using the various technologies we have for science and attractants, we were able to concoct different formulations. This is as far as I can probably go with things being proprietary. And we could do several concoctions of different attractant packages, mix and match different things. Think of it as like a recipe in your favorite foods, right? There's things that don't taste good, and there's things that you mix together and that you're, wow, this tastes really good, right? We're doing that with the fish. It's a filtering process to get that attractant packages right. So that's how you lead up to like Maxent. Look at Maxent flatworms and what they're doing in the market today, right? So I'll relate that back to hard baits. I have there's a casting tank in our research facility, It lets you get the general angler perspective of a fishing lure. It looks like I'm on the deck of a boat, 60 feet long, 6 feet across, 13.5 feet deep. I can cast crankbaits. I can evaluate any competitor, any prototype, and any production bait that comes from our production facility to test the action of the bait as an angler would see it and how it tracks through the water. Obviously, you want baits that track right, very consistent, don't blow out. Buoyancy, suspension, flotation, sinking, we dial that all in there. And then the icing on the cake is this flow tank, right? So I can actually have this flow tank with a standard flow rate. I can put my baits in there the prototypes I built that day, and actually do slow motion video, quantify the specific actions of the baits. It's not one or two different things that make the baits good, though. It's a lot of things working together, lots of, I would say, interactions of different things, like how the tail swings, how the bait rolls, all these things interacting together that build best-in-class actions. And we can test all the actions of any bait, competitor, our prototypes, whatever. And then we have a history of knowing how the fish respond, because we have a racetrack system, and we can actually subject the fish to different baits. So there are actually different treatments, standardized number of fish, and hey, we let them go. This is prototype A, this is prototype B, and we let the fish tell us what they like the best in the lab. So in the lab, we can hone in the best in class actions. We can look at it in the flow tank, and then we can take the icing on the cake then is taken out to the field. So then we go out in the field head to head. It could be the number one competitor bait in the market today, and we'll go head to head against the bait, or it could be against our own prototypes, and we will fish to win. And that is what I want to do as a research person. A lot of people don't think of these things with Berkley, but as a research scientist guy, that is my goal. And I also want them to look super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the cool factor of what's going on too. I mean, it's, lures just look, they look really cool nowadays, and Berkley is really leading the charge in a lot of, I'm not trying to make this I swear I'm not trying to make this into a commercial. Okay. But I can't be objective. I wanted you on because, number one, I love Berkley, but I also, I got a sense just, I'm using Instagram to reach out to people that I want to talk to. And I just got a sense that, I just got a sense that, we have the same kind of, passionate spirit, let's say, with fishing.
I'm going to be texting you every night now.
Please do. No, I mean it. So what was it like when you got? I am not as smart as you. That is very evident to me. I can tell. Very, what we're 30 looks like 32 minutes in this podcast, and I already know that you're highly intelligent, far more intelligent than I am. But what was it like? So I like to go into the more emotional aspects of things. I'm a storyteller.
Yep.
I want to know. We're going to go into technical stuff too. I got your list of baits. There's so many hard baits that you guys are just knocking it out of the park with.
Right.
But so I remember when I first walked into like Bass Pro Shops, in the video department, and I'm seeing the behind the scenes, behind the curtains, how the sausage is being made, how my TV shows that, I grew up on television, like fishing television. To me, fishermen were celebrities, So right. I'm walking in, all of a sudden I'm working with Kevin Van Dam. I'm meeting Johnny Morris. I'm doing all these things. But when I walked in that headquarters, I was like, oh my! It was like getting the golden ticket. Walking into the chocolate factory.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I think of it like. I kind of wish we would do the golden ticket and have like 5 random people come in here. That'd be fun.
Well, because here's the thing. Even as a guy, I grew up in southern Minnesota. I didn't grow up that far from you. So you live.
Are you a Twins fan?
I am. I actually. I got my Minnesota hat on. Just the state of Minnesota logo hat.
Yep.
But I'm usually wearing a dilapidated, sweat stained, nasty hat. It's amazing my wife even talks to me anymore because I wear it all the time.
That was my old Twins hat. I always all my old pictures growing up, I was wearing Twins hats. That was my team.
So it was like, we didn't, I wasn't that far from where you were growing up, and so you were in Northwest Iowa. I was, where Austin is. Austin, Minnesota is where I was born, the home of Spam. I was like 30 minutes south of there. I was like right on the border of Iowa. And so, you're living in Spirit Lake now, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
right. I live in Milford and work in Spirit Lake.
Okay. So yeah, that's Northwest Iowa, which is known as the Iowa Great Lakes. There's Spirit Lake. There's East and West Okoboji.
Yep.
Actually, awesome fisher. I love that area.
They're awesome. World class right now.
Yeah. What's that?
World class right now. If you bass fish, I mean, you almost need like 28, 29 pounds to win a tournament. So
yeah, I need to talk to the guy that's running, the production side of Major League Fishing. I need to we need to do a team series up at Spirit Lake, because I love East and West Okoboji. I did.
Well, we were just Bobby Lane and I and Kyle, soft bait designer that works for me. We were just fishing on the lakes the other day, so that it is cool. All the pros that come in here fish these lakes with us, so we do a lot of testing on these lakes and other places, but and into Minnesota in your territory, we like to infiltrate up there in South Dakota. I always like to stay connected up there. So
it was for me, even to have Berkley growing up, not that far from me, it was kind of like I just felt a connection to the company in a weird way just growing up. It's like, Berkley's in Spirit Lake. It's not that far from here, So what was it like? Just kind of describe, when you first walked in to the headquarters there. What was it like for a guy that has been so eaten up with fishing for his, since you were a kid? What was that like going in there?
Well, I think first and foremost, I grew up around here, so it was always kind of like in the back of my mind, I would love to work here, And then I went to school for fisheries, and I didn't really think that probably was going to happen, and then all of a sudden it did. But just growing up, fishing the baits, walking in this door the first day of work was really surreal, right? So number one, it's amazing here. I felt like Pac-Man. So there's my 80s reference there.
Oh, I like it. I'm all about the 80s.
Oh yeah. I love that. So it took me like 2 weeks to figure out where everything was here in the back in production, where they make all the line and all the power bait, power worms, all that stuff. In Gulp, it's huge, it's big, and it's easy to get lost there. But I don't know, coming from a guy from Northwest Iowa, this was my hometown company that I thought, man, it would be cool. I love fishing. I love the worms. Obviously, I played poker for the worms, and I got a couple funny stories for you. Number one, I used to work at the bait shop here. It was called Oh Shucks Bait and Tackle, and I did from like 1998 to 2002, just through my summer vacations and stuff. And I actually cleaned fish for Berkley Bedell.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So Berkley Bedell brought his bluegills in, and he was particular, by the way. He liked them skinned, so I had to take this Townsend fish skinner thing and skin the bluegills. Dude, I'm telling you, it took so long to do it. But he gave me a $20 tip every time, and he always asked for me, so I must have done a good enough job. But I just took my time because I could listen to Berkley Bedell talk.
That's awesome.
That was cool. And the other thing that I think you'll find funny is Dr. Keith Jones. We were driving on a field test. I think we're going to Venice, Louisiana to test saltwater gulp, right? Which is an amazing place to catch fish and field test, by the way, the giant redfish. He asked me, he's like, hey, and I caught him off guard. He's like, did you ever think you'd be working at Berkley designing baits? And I just said, yep. And he just turned around and he was like, really? You just said yes? And I tell you what, my sophomore year in college, they said they had us do a speech, right? Speech class, and it would be, what was your dream job? And it was to work at Pier Fishing. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Good for you.
yeah. So anyway, this is the ultimate dream job. And I actually go out and I do a seminar now about how we build baits called The Science of Fishing Lures. I do it from time to time, and I go through from the beginning to end how we develop baits at Berkley. I wanted to be able to show that without proprietary stuff, and show kind of the background or the sneak peek of how we build fishing lures. It's kind of like if you have your favorite band. I remember when CDs were still a thing, and you waited 3 years for them to make that album, and they released one song in 3 years. Then they let it sit there for a year before they released the album, but you died to know the behind the scenes, right?
Yep.
So that was, to me, what I wanted to share with people about how professional bait designers kind of go about their day and develop baits, and the testing and research we do. That story needs to be told, right? There's a lot of that background that I don't think people understand. And then what I do is I usually get a bunch of product and I donate it to the kids. So
That's fantastic.
The big blowout, bring rods, reels, baits, get it all out of my office. My office is normally not this clean, by the way. You can't have anybody that works here. This is an anomaly right now. I did
It
it
looks
just
fantastic, man.
Hey,
Like
man,
being surrounded by lures is one of the greatest. I mean, as a fisherman, it feels, it feels like it's like a safety blanket, or it's just comfort. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I've tried to, my studio in the background here, I got the rods here. I'm trying to make it so this eventually you can't even see the wall. It's just going to, it's just going to be full of stuff, lures, we're getting there. But yeah, no, I love it. I think, I always, that's the other thing. There's so many wonderful things about fishing, like that get, passionate anglers just all torqued up. I mean, going into a tackle shop is one of those things, and just to see
Right.
the lures everywhere, and you're always, yeah, go ahead.
That was the best. That was the best thing for me. It was to get that consumer side of the, I guess of that understood of the market, and learn what the consumer of the product wants. So working at a bait shop, I could talk to anybody from novice anglers to mid-tier anglers to high-end anglers. And, it really put perspective in, hey, what do these people want when they go out on a fishing trip? A lot of people, they aren't just a pro. They're not a tournament avid. A lot of these people are weekend people. I want to be able to create baits, and we do with the team here, to make it super easy for anybody to catch fish. I want the kids to be able to fish a topwater walking bait that is the easiest bait to walk the dog that there ever was. So we developed the hijacker, the easiest walking the dog bait that I could possibly ever be able to achieve here with prototyping. It took over 30 different prototypes, and I think we might sell like that bait in one size now. But the popper, like our bullet pop, I wanted a popper that did it all. Crankbaits, I want a crankbait to have a catch rate. So it's tied into the field test, right? So when we look at, here's a cool thing, like with Gary Parsons and Keith Kavais and Flicker and hit sticks and now deep hit sticks, we look at catch rates on those, and what not a better way to test than Legends going out, and they're very, very excellent field testers, by the way. They can put the benchmark standard bait on one side, and we can put our bait prototypes on the other side, and we can pull them for X amount of standard time, same amount of line. The cool thing about trolling, you can standardize all this, right? And standardize how fast you're going, and we can actually get data, and we can determine catch rates, right? So I'm always looking to outperform 3-1, which is really hard to do. And if it's just 1-1, I got to go back to the drawing board. And, the deep hit sticks, which we just did for walleye, we got a big market, big water size that's coming at 12. But then we thought, hey, we don't want to just have a big, bait for the Lake Erie and the Great Lakes. Let's build that into some inland lake stuff. So we did a 10.5, which is kind of the tweener. You can fish it in the Great Lakes and you can fish it inland. And then we have a 9, which you could still fish in the Great Lakes, but it's mostly an inland bait. But through this process, I call it like the championship drive process, right? I think of like, what does a quarterback on the team want to do? He wants to win championships and be a leader and help the team. And I think we have a lot of good quarterbacks here. Everybody brings great assets to the team. But when I look at the product, and the pros are like this too, we want to build the best bait to help the angler catch more fish, win championships. Like one of the first baits that I got to do here was the flicker minnow, and it won an NWT event right out the gate, and it's won several championships now. So we did the Fritz side, which won Red Crest with Bobby Lane. We won the Classic with the Stunna, and this is using our proven research models that we have instilled using the Berkley research mentality. So that's super cool.
So I want to get into those baits that you're talking about there, and but first, who decided to? Was it you who was like, "Listen, we need to come up with a line of hard baits that are just second to none"? Like, what was it? Was it you that was like, okay, we got the soft baits line just kicking tail, but let's take that hard bait lineup and let's get all these different types of hard baits and just excel in every one of them. Who was behind that? Was that you? Was it? I mean,
I'm going to always say it's the team. Number one, I'm very, very picky. I kind of wanted to go to school for art too, so I look at things like the Japanese market has inspired me my entire career in terms of like cosmetics. Like think of a hard detail patterns, the eye details. So and there's some good baits that have been developed in the U.S. and you see a lot more of that. But the attention to detail. That's what I wanted to reach that level here personally. That's a personal trait of characteristic that I have. I have a passion and drive to build the best in-class baits for every category. I want to build the best baits, and the team wants to build the best baits. So it wasn't me saying, let's build the best baits for the company and do this. It was a team, the brand managers, they set the stage for, hey, let's build these baits in this particular niche of the market, and let's target this. And then we group together. We talk about what we want the baits to be. We conceptualize. I have an idea in my head. Then I work with Kelly over here who does CAD. So we design it together. And, she and I have been developing these baits, by the way, for 12 years together or something. I'm going on like 13 years here. So I want to say that, that design element comes from our side in R&D. And then, but then you get all the other pieces of the puzzle. You get fish research coming in, and we got to field test the bait, and we got to do the lab test to make sure the bait is right. I will build the baits, the prototypes, one by hand, and I will adjust different things to get the action right. So let me just show you here. So here's a bait right here. It's called the Berkley Money Badger. This bait just came out last year. It's probably one of the best crankbaits I've ever had the chance to develop. Took a lot of different things that I've thought about in hard baits, and we blended it together in the design of this bait, right? So things that you can do, look at the bill angle. You got, exaggerated round lip, pull point. So the key things with the hard bait, right, that drive the action once you get the shape design set is basically, your bill angle, your pull point position, your bill width, all those things interacting together. It's not just, hey, the bills has to be this long or this wide. It all interacts, and it's very complicated. This bait right here, one size took over, I'd say, 31 different revisions to get this right. And that was after we have a ton of research on what makes baits right and what they need to do. We took this bait, here's an example. We took this bait out in the field and it didn't have a weight transfer, right? But see how it has this steep, wide bill?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is this bait would helicopter real bad. It had the great action, like it was dialed in. But then we talked about, hey, I personally wanted the Money Badger to be able to be a bass bait too. Gary Parsons comes in from the walleye side, and you want to be able to cast it, but it's trolling. But he and I aligned, let's make these 3 bigger sizes. So you have a 4 and a 5, a 625, a 675, and a 725. Those 3 bigger sizes all come with a weight transfer ball. So that took away the helicoptering. You can cast this thing in the wind. It casts a mile now. It has the built-in action that we tested on the fish with the catch rates, but a lot went into this bait, and probably 100 prototype bait to get 5 sizes on the market of this bait right here.
So what would you? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
On
that particular bait, like on the Money Badger, so you're saying that it's a good walleye bait, and I would say too with the flicker shad, that's a great. It's a phenomenal walleye lure. But it's also has its application in bass fishing, I would say, colder water.
Right.
So where do you see the Money Badger fitting in with walleye fishing? Where do you see it with bass fishing?
So this is an aggressive action bait. It's a crayfish body, hybrid crayfish baitfish body design. So that's kind of what we set out to do with this bait, right? So it's got the flash disc technology right here for that better than balsa action. We have
describe that flash disc. I think that's important.
Right,
people understand
right.
That.
So I don't know if you can all see it very good.
Yeah.
I got to make sure I'm turning this right here. But it's got this flash disc right here in the throat of the bait. There we go. And this is a low center gravity disc weight, and it's paired with a thin shell. So we actually cracked the balsa code in hit sticks, right? It's pretty incredible, but the hit stick, and now I'm going on a tangent about a different bait, but let me just explain that bait because it's important to set apart the Berkley research. This better than balsa thing, people ask about it. Is it real? Yeah, it is real. I wouldn't be spending every day of my life trying to painfully crack a balsa code and get super stressed and to do that. I have goals here to develop baits that have certain characteristics. The company has these goals. They're all aligned, but the hit stick, right, goes back to Gary and Keith again. We wanted to create a stick bait for the walleye market that had a balsa action in a rigid, durable plastic bait that was clear, that you could have clear colors and you could do a lot more with. It took us so long to get that. It took my first 10 years of being at Berkley with the flow tank at the helm, being able to analytically quantify bait actions. There it is right there. You put it up. Perfect.
Yep.
To get the roll just exactly, the wide exaggerated roll that you need with this type of bait, the characteristics of a balsa bait in a plastic bait. And I paired up that low center gravity flash disc technology with a thin balsa, kind of thin shell-like body to get that balsa-like action. Just to get that bill angle right, though. You could tilt that 100 different ways, and it wasn't right, and we had to just crack that code. So I changed the bill angles, the pull points. I moved the flash discs around a ton of different ways. The body shape, if you look at this body right here, it's actually designed off a western black-nosed dace, which was a species that I caught in creeks when I was a kid. I love that little species. You can look it up if you want to be a nerd like me, I guess.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you, dude.
But you know what? We cracked this code in this bait. And then it wasn't just like we can expand it and we scaled the sizes. Here's a made of 5. Like we started with the 9, took 31 tries, I think, on that. Then we went to the 7 and the 5, and then the 11 and the 13. We had to crack the code in every dang size, man. So every time it's better than balsa, we have to crack the code in the shape, and then every size. We don't just scale it up and say it's good and pull it through the tank. We actually have to specifically quantify the bait to understand it's right and have the action characteristics of balsa, not only from that standpoint in the lab and the float tank, but cranking it. It's got to have the right vibration and feel. Fish relate to vibrations through their lateral line senses. All this stuff matters, and it's a durable bait that is, it's not going to have pike bite through it and pierce the balsa and get waterlogged, which just changes the action. And the other thing is we can consistently make them. Every balsa bait is a little bit different, and I've tested them in the tank. I could take 10 of bait X balsa, 10 of X bait cedar, and I could put them in the tank, and I can look at the actions of the bait. I could quantify them, and they are all different. There's a big range, and that's why some balsa baits catch them real good and some don't, right? We can dial that in exactly with this bait right there in any of our balsa baits. So look at this bait right here, the Dime. This is our newest line of crankbaits coming to Berkley. It's launching this fall. Super proud of this. I think this is the most research-driven crankbait in the history of pure fishing, that we have actually dived into that better than balsa action. It's got the flash disc technology in the bigger, in all the sizes, but in the small size have the weight, tungsten weight transfer. So you have the smallest baits in the market that can probably cast the furthest. Casting's important, but keeping that balsa action. But let me show you this. Right there, my man. This is the size 10, and it took 80 prototypes, 78 to be exact, but I'll say 80, just to crack the code in this one bait. One bait, dude. 80 prototypes. Is that not awesome. My code?
That is so awesome.
No one knows that, and I'm here to tell that story because it's important for people to understand the science and what goes into these baits. And, overall, there's 4 sizes of the Dime. There's a 4, a 6, a 10, and a 15. Okay, just 4 sizes that hit the shelf, 140 prototypes.
Wow.
Across the board, all the sizes. So yeah.
What are you, in that particular, the Dime 10, what is that niche? What is that filling? What is that bait filling? What niche is that bait filling? What application is that bait going to shine in?
This is a mid-range diving crankbait. So if you look at this, some of the smaller size, look at this right here. Here's the 6 right here. So it's kind of a shad profiled crankbait, a little bit more compact than some of the others on the market. I wanted to make sure that it was a little more compact. And in weight transfer in the smaller sizes, so they cast them out. I think you might be able to hear that as it goes back and forth. But kind of that mid-tier action. So the 10 and 15 have a pretty tight action. The fish, looking back from David Fritz, I worked a lot with David Fritz and developed a lot of baits with him. Crankbait king, right, for bass.
Absolutely.
They prefer that tight action when you fish a deep crankbait in the summer months when it gets warm, they're out deep. That's the action that we looked at, and that's that shad type shimmy, right? That's what we put into the 10 and the 15. The 4 and 6 have a little bit more. This one's kind of the tweener between that kind of tighter action and a crayfish action, more that harder action. So if you cast this 6, it's going to feel kind of more like that crayfish action. And then the 4 is more compact, and it's got more of that harder crayfish action in a different body form than, say, this. So you look at these baits and you're kind of like, oh, do I buy a money badger or do I buy a Dime? 2 different baits, shad profile, bluegills, crayfish, and kind of randomness going on with the money badger. This is a hard, aggressive crayfish thump your rod tip bait. This is kind of that mid-tier action, And I'm super proud about all these baits. The money badger's just killing it. It's my go-to smallmouth bait if I'm cranking smallmouth. Really like the Dime for a lot of things. It's catching a lot of different fish. Real great for largemouth smallies. Walleyes, it's actually doing pretty good for walleyes. I always catch walleyes every time I throw this bait. Was it designed to troll for walleyes like a flicker shad? No, but it's a great casting bait. So, a lot goes into that. And then like 20 colors. We have 20 great colors. You got some translucents that you don't have in balsa and wood baits, but yet you can get that balsa action. So that just kind of sets in the consistency, right? So that really sets it apart in that research. Me knowing that we put 140 different prototypes into the bag to get this thing, just 4 baits on the shelf. That's to me is what it's all about.
That's very impressive to say the least. And I'm sure this comes across in this podcast how passionate you are, and it's exciting because it comes across that there's no BS going on right here. This is someone who is super passionate about dialing lures in to get them, operating, performing, running as best as they possibly can to catch fish. And it's awesome to hear it, because there are some jobs where people just go to work and it's just like, well, I'm done. When you
Right.
have a business where you have passionate people in that business and they're striving and striving and striving, Lord have mercy, are they going to be making products that are just going to drop your jaw? Because, I mean, that's what I love. Like, that's what I'm so excited to see in fishing is that there are guys that are eating up with it that are in important positions. And obviously, we can all tell that you're one of these people, and that's why Berkley's knocking it out of the park. I hope they're paying you enough.
I'm good. I'm good. I think this is a phenomenal place to work. I probably sound like a pitch person, but again, I couldn't think of a more cool, fun place to actually work. I got to say, every day I come in here and it's not like a job. It's like a hobby, a passion. I talk to Kyle, soft bait designer, every day. Kelly, everybody here at work, we all talk every day about baits, and to me, that's the ultimate fun time. Is I'm having fun at work. Yes, it's stressful. Yes, there's very, very critical timelines, and it's like the dime, dude. The 78 prototype, when I was hitting like 50, I was kind of freaking out. You can
go through that process. I think that's really interesting. I actually have it here in my notes. I mean, obviously, it can't be any proprietary stuff, but
no.
Like, just like, what is that? And just to get that thing, you send it off, and then this thing has to be mass produced. And is that like, are you sweating bullets that thing is like, okay?
No, because
what's that like?
No, because we've been able to dial in things so well with our product specs that we have to develop the product, build the mold. It's to a T. We have a great review process in terms of getting it all dialed in to the nth degree. Trust me, I'm just as picky working on that with all of the team members, and they are just as picky back to me, getting these things locked and loaded, ready to go. But to ensure that the final product that is in shelf, like we talk all about these prototypes, right? And here's like, okay, here's number 24, prototype number 24. Oh, by the way, it had a disc weight in it at one point, like a dredger. Doesn't anymore. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
But to basically dial this in to assure the consumer that what I'm talking about is not just a bunch of BS, we have the flow tank, and then we can go back in the lab and we can head to head. I can compare and analytically analyze the final baits from the production mold that are built as swim test samples, and I do it several times throughout the process. I don't just do it once and I'm good. I sample multiple times throughout the point it gets the production tools built until it hits the shelf, and I can compare it to the original 3D printed prototypes that we hand built here and assure everybody that it has the same exact action using our research facility, using that flow tank and looking at the specific models of how the bait moves and performs. And I can assure you they all match. And that is hard too, because I've spent many sleepless nights looking. For example, one time with the dredger, the pull point was sitting on the bait too high. What that does, just 10 thousandths too high.
Wow.
Dude, thousandths. 10 thousandths is nothingness. And the bait was blown out. You'd start reeling the whole trick of, I want baits to be able to be fished fast. I'm a speed reeler when it comes to reaction bites. I'd actually learned that from just growing up fishing, chucking baits real fast, and the fish would bite it. And David Fritz is the same. He was a chuck and wind speed guy. The pull points, if it's not right, the bait blew out. And boy, I tell you what, I didn't know what to do. That was a learning experience. I was like 2016, and I didn't know what to do. And, I took a pliers, smashed down the pull point, and threw it in there, and it worked. And, so again, then we had to make sure that the supplier had that right in our specs. So we actually now, lesson learned, we actually put a height on the pull point to make sure that it's always sitting in the right spot every time coming out of the mold.
Wow. So let's go into just some of the lure. Like, I know that your hard bait lineup is, I mean, it's very extensive now. So we'll just touch upon some of them. And let's first actually go into, were you affiliated with, or did you design the snap jig? Is that your creation as well?
Yeah, that was my baby. That was an idea that just came out of nowhere. So basically, we talked about, hey, these type of baits that are out there, walleye guys call them glide baits, but they're the lead minnow body formed baits that everybody's familiar with. They call them ice jigs. The thought with this was bait delivery systems. And hey, we sell a ton of gulp power bait, and Maxent wasn't available then, but it is now. How can we get that same action and be able to put a soft bait on there? And, so the whole goal with this, and this was a very hard project, 3 years going to get this right. And it's totally different. When it first came on the market, and it's since been copied, but that's fine. There was nothing out there like it. And the baits actually darted laterally in the water column, and it achieved what it needed to do. With baits like 3-inch twitch-tail minnows was my go-to bait. And it just caught everything, crappies, walleyes, smallmouth, and it allowed you to fish the water column. In my opinion, it was the first ever true bait that you could fish and cover the water column laterally that was a jig head that you could pair with soft baits. So I always say it was kind of like the first forward-facing jig head. That was, to me, kind of ahead of its time. You can control it in the water column. And, I still think that this jig is a really cool jig and catches a lot of fish. We still make it. I wouldn't say it's like the hottest thing on the market for sales, but if you haven't tried it, try it, because it's a really fun way to fish, super addictive, and it catches literally everything. But be prepared, my friend, to see more things in the future. You see the power switch just came out.
Yeah.
So that's the soft bait. That's the first kind of soft bait pre-rig that we're dabbling in forward-facing stuff. So we got stuff in the works, and we're always thinking ahead. Forward-facing sonar stuff's not going anywhere. Yeah. So, I'm excited about what the future holds with products that could be used in that technology. But again, the snap jig was cool, and you don't have to use forward-facing sonar for any of these baits. I mean, I use it now. I use Active Target, and it's a super fun way to fish. I love it. But don't get me wrong, I started out, I'm a bank beater. I love casting in the bank. I love throwing top waters like Choppo is like my favorite lure. Watching big smallmouth blow up. Hopefully I'm going this weekend to do that. Being able to watch the fish respond to your bait in real time, it helps you learn as a lure designer too. So lure designers at Berkley are using that in understanding how fish respond to baits, and we're building baits around that concept. So you'll see it. The power switch is that first one. That's all I can say for now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's an awesome. I've seen a little sneak peek of that particular lure, but we've got you brought it up, and this style of lure is so fantastic. And I have heard this lure. This is the best way to say it. I've probably heard this lure. You hear this lure more than you see it. It's very pronounced. It's this lure right here, right. The Choppo. Talk about that. That is a fantastic bait.
Right. So the Choppo, boy, when we launched that 2018 with Justin Lucas. So, we developed in a series of years probably 18 different topwater baits with Justin Lucas, right? And this one was the one we came out initially with the 90 and a 120. We've since filled the line with a 110, and my favorite is the 75. I think the one in the picture you have is the 90. That but like that bait, there's some not samples, but there's products that have been around in the market like that. the top raider, for example. The top raider, I think, was the first one that I can recall.
Perfect example. Yeah, not to cut you off, but I've filmed a ton of muskie, shows, and the top raider was a muskie bait, correct? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So it was already like a lot of these lures. It's kind of interesting how in fishing it's kind of segmented, right? Like, guys that have been using a certain kind of musky lure that's very productive, they might never even heard of that kind of lure, that style of lure in bass fishing, or same with like bass fishing. A certain kind of lure has never even been heard of in walleye fishing. I'm not doing a good job articulating this, but fishing is so segmented that it's funny. Like I saw that top, that what would you call that, plopper style bait or whatever. I saw it in muskie fishing long before I ever saw it being used in bass fishing. But anyway, I digress.
No, yeah. And so, that bait was fun. What we did that was different than the ones out there, though, is we actually, and I don't really have one here to tell the story, but they're back there somewhere. We actually took the tail and we made it out of a rigid hard plastic. So it's more rigid. It never deforms. It always stays in place. It's lighter. It catches. Like I actually took them to kind of like this airflow chamber, right? So it's, here's the physics thing, right? So I could take the competitors and other ones on the market, and I could check how fast the tail prop turned at standard air speeds. And ours was just humming, man, and the other ones weren't. So, looking to be able to do that and using technology to enhance the bait. We also increased the surface area and the angle that tail sat. So as it's going through the water, it's creating even more turbulence, a louder sound. So we pay attention to the little things that change shapes too. So you look at that bait, and it's kind of an homage to an old bait that's been around since probably, I think, when the whopper ploppers came out a little bit before it, and then the top raider, I think that came out in, what was it, late 80s, early 90s?
That sounds right. Yeah.
But it's different, and it looks different in terms of, like, if you look at the tail and the function of the bait. I didn't want the bait to roll over. was a challenging thing. So there's a lot of positive things with this bait that we put in the time and effort in making it enhanced and making it a great fish catcher. And it's one of my favorite baits. There's a lot of baits that are my favorite baits, apparently, that I say, like the Stunna. I'm a jerk bait guy and I'm a topwater guy. I made a lot of topwater baits before I came here in jerk bait. So I'm a jerk bait freak. So when we made the Stunna, and I'll show you right here. Here's one that Hank Cherry gave me, by the way, that he just absolutely burned up. You probably can't see the hook rash and the rash on it, but he actually did give, no joke, man. He actually gave me one of the Stunnas that he won the classic on. Gave it to me, signed it. I made him sign it. Yep, it's hanging up at a shadow box. But talk about how cool is that? To have a bait that actually won the classic. Not only did we build the bait, but he literally gave me a bait that helped win the classic. And he had just a handful of them. So that was maybe the coolest thing that's ever happened to me here.
Sure.
He didn't have to give me that. Think about that. I'd probably keep the lures or something, but it meant a lot to him that we built the bait for him, and he gave me the bait. And dude, that's cool.
So what is, like, I love jerk baits too. I think like the thing that's so, and this makes a lot of sense to be talking about this right now, because I was working with Van Dam all last week. But Van Dam is a tremendous jerkbait fisherman. I've always loved a jerkbait because, and Van Dam knows about triggering fish. Van Dam rose the bar as far as, like, okay, I've said this a billion times, but like, he showed that bass fishing can be kind of like a mathematical equation.
Right.
It's like the more presentations you make in a day, the more triggering, the more, erratic presentations, the more fish you can trigger in a day. It was like, it was just like just running and gunning and blah, blah, blah. And a jerkbait is so fantastic with triggering fish. If anything, I think that people sometimes don't fish a jerkbait aggressively enough.
Right.
What is it about a jerkbait that you like? And tell me about what you designed into that Stunna that makes it so good.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say a funny thing about a jerkbait, because everybody teases me that I'd make all I would do is make jerkbaits if I could do that, and that's not true. I love all baits, but the snap jig is a jig that moves like a jerkbait. So think of that. Jerkbait action in a jig. So that kind of tells you a little bit about myself there. So that was just the one going back to that. But this bait right here, and this took over like 50 versions of prototype to get the final. We only did 2 models. We did a plus one and then the shallow lipped one here. What it took to get into this bait was obviously I have a thorough understanding of jerkbait actions and how jerkbaits need to be basically built and fished. And Hank Cherry obviously is probably the best jerkbait angler out there today in bass. And he also has a very specific way he thinks about jerkbaits. And we meshed perfectly. Like it was like, to me, the dream pairing to be able to pair our team with Hank Cherry to be able to build this bait. So, we wanted to have, there's 2 block weights, low center of gravity block weights you can see in the bottom there. It's got a flattened bottom, and it's got a weight transfer in it, so it casts really good. But probably the biggest thing with this bait is the cutting dynamic darting action laterally in the water column, and it all comes from the bill design. We have a different bill design than some of the others on the market and different pull point. We also wanted a very strong durable bait. A lot of high-end jerk baits have phenomenal performance, but they lack a little bit in terms of the build durability. So we built this out of a super durable plastic material, and we also, we widened out the lip, made it super durable, but I made some too wide at first, and then they didn't have the right action, so had to grind this down with the Dremel tool until I had the right action. And I think we had 3 finalists in the hopper, and then sent them to Hank, and I knew which one I wanted. Hank threw them for a couple days, and then he said which one he wanted, and we were aligned 100%. So once we did that, then we had to do all the fine tuning of the bait, getting it just perfect, like the subtle scale details, dialing in the final weight transfer and the block weights. He threw it and the action was good, but the sink rate wasn't perfect. And this is a slow sinking jerkbait, so it sits nose down, it slowly sinks to go in that water column. A cool thing about this and jerkbaits, a lot of them are suspending, right? They sit there. By the way, there really isn't no such thing as a truly suspending jerkbait,
it's all
right?
Water temperature related.
It's water temperature, and it's also related to the viscosity of the water, the salinity. I've actually got it down right now to, baits that plus or minus 0.0304 grams is the difference between a bait actually slowly rising and slowly sinking.
Wow.
If you just let it stabilize. We're talking minute nothing. No bait can truly just sit there. Yep. It inevitably has to either sink or float. A lot of people don't know that. They talk about jerkbaits, if it doesn't just sit there, right? Yep. Well, if you actually looked at your jerkbait and you put it in an aquarium like I do every day, you would see that that's not true. I've looked at every jerkbait out there, by the way, I can tell you. But we dialed it in with the sink rate. I actually have the factory would probably, I thought they wanted to kill me, but I actually have them weighing out every block to a precise weight every time. So it standardized the sink rate of this bait. It's not just, hey, we throw it in there. If the block weight does not meet that exact target and there's 2 in a bait, then it's not right. Then they don't go in the bait and they don't build the bait. So we actually have that dialed in precisely with super precise parts. But that's just some of the little things about this bait. We got these Fusion 19 treble hooks. Super, super sharp treble hooks. You know, again, they're a super phenomenal treble hook, and they don't break. You know, they're good enough. They'll hook the fish. They're super sharp. They hook the fish very easy, but they don't bend out. So you get the benefit of like a light wire hook, but it's a 1X hook. So it's strong yet penetrates the mouth of a fish, and that's that Fusion 19, the blend of having the right point. And dude, I mean, I could go on. Fusion 19, that's a huge part of my life here too, developing that lineup of jigs and hooks, you know. I mean, I could go on, but essentially I think we developed, in my opinion, what would be a dream jerk bait for Hank Cherry and myself and a lot of anglers that fish jerk baits.
So you also worked with, you were talking about earlier, I need to make sure that this is the right bait coming up, and it is, the Fritz side. And that, I mean, you know, I grew up, let's say the mid-90s, early 90s. I mean, it was David Fritz, man. You know, it was crankbaiting. It was, you know, I'm trying to think, gosh, it was like early 90s. It was what lake was that that he was just cranking, and I should remember what lake that was. But I mean, in when I was younger and so eaten up with, I mean, I wanted to be a professional bass fisherman growing up. That's what I wanted to do. And so watching David and seeing him crank, and I mean, he was the at the top of the game as far as crankbait fishermen. So this crankbait, of which I have a number of, it's just a beautiful crankbait, number one. So congratulations on that. It's just, I love throwing the thing. It is a flat-sided, you know, crankbait. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're the one that designed it. It's a more tight-running crankbait. Do you think, you know, the Fritz side is more like what? Just tell me your thinking with the Fritz side.
Right. So, you know, again, you know, it was a team-driven process with this. We had, you know, obviously David came in. We designed it together with him. It's got that low center of gravity disc weight technology, better than balsa action, put into this bait that we'd used our research facility to crack that code. Like I mentioned, the hit stick was a precursor to the action that we were able to achieve in this bait by cracking the balsa code for the first time in plastic baits. And I've evaluated a zillion plastic baits in our tank, right? And I can tell you, maybe there's people that said it before, but there's really not others out there that have that balsa bait. That's why it takes 78 versions of the Dime 10 to get the balsa action, right? I just feel like a lot of companies don't have the time and resources and the scientists behind the baits. It's mostly engineering. This bait was using all that stuff and kind of putting it in a flat side crankbait. And then, you know, David Fritz, obviously his knowledge is very vast, and in terms of what he knows with the bass crankbaits. So it was a good ultimate pairing with that. And I think we started with the Fritz side 5. That is like the one, man. Like that, if you told me a Fritz side to pick up today, and they're all great, I'd pick up the 5 any day. That's the one. And that one won Red Crest. Bobby Lane won Red Crest on that one. And I think the first year we launched the Fritz side, the 5, you know, Edwin Evers gets up on stage. I forget if it was like top 5 or something. And he brought that bait up on stage and he talked about how good it was. And he just got the prototypes, and heck, they're that confident in the way it fished in practice. They were fishing a Bassmaster Classic with a bait they had never fished really before until the practice of the Classic. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
So, you know, but yeah, it's a super bait. Super proud of that one too.
Where do you think that bait really shines best?
You know, it just depends. You know, obviously I'm up north, and it, you know, up here it's spring and it goes into the summer, and then it kind of tapers off for a while and it gets great again in the fall, cast and riprap. Down south, it's like a springtime bait, cold water bait, but I see guys fishing it later on too. But, you know, you see a lot of guys fishing it in the spring, cold water stuff.
Gotcha. this is, as far as like, I would say, would you say like the flicker, the flicker minnow, the flicker shad, is that where you really started kind of making, I don't mean to exaggerate this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but do you feel like that was when you really started making your mark in the industry, designing lures? You're working a lot with Gary Parsons, Keith Gavias. I was filming. I've worked with those guys since 2000. I met them when I was working in the video department at Bass Pro Shops. So
yep.
I did the first 2 seasons of their show, The Next Bite.
Wow.
So yeah, I was, I was just, I think the world of those guys, and I just, that lure, and talking about how much, time it took to develop that lure. And I know how both Gary and Keith are just, Gary was a dentist and Keith was a programmer at IBM. These guys are very, very smart.
Yeah, very analytical.
Very analytical. So just kind of go into that, and I'll bring up, let's see here. I'll bring up, was it the flicker shad that was first, that was designed, or was it the flicker minnow?
The flicker shad came first. So my boss actually, and fellow coworker Chris Pitsillis get the credit for this bait. This was before I came here, a 5 and a 7, and they paired up with Gary Parsons, and they had actually worked on the Frenzy line of baits that stemmed before that. So they had done some bait research with that line of bass baits, and then they wanted to do walleye baits. And I just remember the funny story that my boss Keith tells me is, they get this shad style crankbait all dialed in using what they've learned with Frenzy. And then Gary and Keith come in and they look at the bait and they say, well, that's great if you want to catch bass. And then they said, if you want to catch walleyes, you got to redo this bait. So that was the funny story that I guess Chris and my boss Keith were like, oh, they were kind of all up in the air, and they were like, oh boy, now what?
Yeah,
we got to redo this whole thing that they thought they had in the bag.
Right.
They thought they were done, and they were going to show them, hey, here's the bait, and they're going to love it. Nope, they are so analytical, and I will give a lot of credit to Gary Parsons and Keith Gavias for they helped me in my career probably more than they know. They were the first hard bait guys I ever worked with, probably the most analytical hard bait guys. Like I said, Keith Gavias, IBM, like he's very analytical in understanding baits. Gary Parsons the same way. And I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I would not be here today kicking out all the bass baits and all the other baits that I've been able to have the luxury of working on for this company without their knowledge and insight on hard baits and how to develop hard baits. So my first baits, I came in the door, the 4 and 6 flicker shad were kind of in process. And then I kind of took over at the tail end of that, dialing in the actions with Gary and Keith. We started with like some conference calls with the phone. There was no Teams or Skype. And I would send them videos of the bait through our communication lines. And we would just review it over the phone, and they would say yes or no. But then, that was when they couldn't come in. We always tried to bring them in, right? Bringing them in that's the best way to get things done quick. And that's the ultimate way to dial in a bait, right? If you have a pro attached anyway. Now we have the lab facility, and I could say about dialing any bait for bass or walleyes based on working here for so long and having books like this one, right here.
Yeah.
Lab
awesome.
book right here. I have like 10 of these things that would, that are basically
awesome.
tell the secrets. But, anyway.
It's like the In Fisherman Book of Secrets. Remember that? You were probably an In Fisherman nerd, right? Remember the In Fisherman Book of Secrets? It looked like it was leather bound, and then it'd come in the mail, and it was just paper.
I love that book. That was neat. But this will never be published, So, just those guys being able to work with the baits and to work on them in that scientific way. They get it. They get the science, and a lot of these guys have different cool things that they bring on to the table when designing baits. I've become really good friends with those guys. I can talk to I can pick up the phone and call these guys about any day of the week, and Gary will always answer. care. He doesn't care how busy he is. He almost always answers immediately when I call, and then we just talk about baits and we talk about ideas, and we always brainstorming. By the way, it's fun.
That podcast that I did with him. If someone wants to be a pro fisherman, they really need to look at that podcast. I can't remember what episode that was, but Gary, we talked for I swear it was 3 hours. Gary just kept going, and I'm just go. Gary's one of the greatest competitive anglers of all time. And he's it was awesome to get that behind the curtain, and I was thinking about young kids listening to it, aspiring pros, just keep going, Gary, just keep going.
Well,
just download everything onto this podcast. Because,
that is one of the coolest things about Gary that I will say is he's got a ton of cool stories, and I can listen to him talk. I can listen to him and Keith tell stories about the 80s, when they had mustaches on tour.
Yeah. There was Skeeter.
Yeah. Yes. And it's cool to look at that, because I love looking back at the 80s. I love the 80s. I don't know why, but
I do too. This artist, The Weeknd, man. I'm there's artists now that are doing better 80s music almost than 80s, real 80s music.
We're getting off on a tangent here, but I actually listen to rock bands from Sweden that sound like they're from the 80s.
But can you tell me some? Because I will be all about it.
Yes. So a couple good ones would be Heat is a really good one.
Heat. I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Yep. It's
they're Swedish?
Yep. It's a Swedish rock band called Heat.
Okay.
And, they're really good. I'm trying to think of there's tons of them. That's the one that really stands out to me. Reckless Love is a good one.
Okay.
They have some bad albums, but they have some good ones. But those are good ones.
Those are two artists, Heat and Reckless Love.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I can't even. I'm saying that on a fishing podcast.
Dude, no. You don't know what podcast you're on, man. Here's the thing. Fishing. When you're out fishing, you talk with your buddy. You talk about everything. You're not only talking about fishing. So, you talk about everything. So this podcast, I'm trying to, and why wouldn't I talk with the Berkley lure designer about Swedish rock bands that sound like they're from the 80s?
Yeah, but then I talked to the guys from Pier Fishing Sweden, and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm not into that.
Hey, you what you like, Dan.
Yeah,
you like.
But, here's the thing, I grew up kind of listening to that pop punk stuff. I Blink-182 in college, high school. That was my thing. I still love that band. I still like all that stuff. But that, and I really like bands that sound okay. Another good band, if you like 80s sounding stuff, check out Acceptance.
Okay. Acceptance.
Acceptance. And I'm trying to think what the name of that album was. It's not their latest one, but it was the one before. Kind of had some cool artwork on it. But it's really, really good. It's like the best sounding 80s music ever, but modernized, and it sounds,
I love it.
Sounds super, super cool.
I'm loving, have you ever heard of, it's something jacket. It's something jacket. It's safety jacket or, because it's like a European band. And it's something jacket, and it's.
I know. I know. I've heard of it, but I can't put it together.
Life jacket, something jacket.
That might be fishing. Life jacket.
It's not life jacket.
If I had a band, I would call it life jacket because that's hilarious.
Yeah, it's like it's something. Oh my gosh, it's really good. It's like a European band that sounds like they're from the 80s, but Yeah. How did we get off on this tangent? I don't know, but I love the 80s. Here's the other thing. I love pop music. I like all kinds of different music, but I don't care what anybody says. Their pop music is great. It's popular for a reason because it sounds great. You know what I mean? So that's why a lot of. Sorry, not everything has to. I don't know. I remember in high school. This is gonna date me now. So in high school, growing up in California, everybody's like cool, and they're listening to like in my era. So this was in the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, growing to high school, and everybody was like, I got to listen to Depeche Mode or Morrissey. I'm over here rocking out to Poison. So that should kind of, and I'm like,
yeah. My wife and I went to Bret Michaels at concert.
Yeah.
We went and he was hitting the fairs, at that point in his career. But, dude, it was awesome.
Selling out the fairs, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was sold out. It was actually the headliner that year. It was sold out, and it was awesome, man. It was, I think he had that Rock of Love reality show.
Right. Yes. I remember
that, by the way. I've just heard about it. But anyway, it was sold out. My wife loves the 80s hair metal. My in-laws like it, so we always talk about that stuff. And I love listening to music and thinking about baits, and I listen to music while I work on baits, and sometimes not all the time.
I'm going to think about that every time I use your baits. I'm like, he was listening to 80s style music when he was designing the Honey Badger. So that's pretty cool.
Okay, so think about it this way. We have a flicker shad color called Sunset 84. So that is kind of it. It looks kind of like the synth wave thing,
Love
the
it.
trend that's happening right now.
Right
the
on.
synth wave colored bait.
Yes.
So it's called Sunset 84. So it's all about those 80s palm tree. Like, you ever see those
Miami
retro,
Vice?
Yes, the kind of the sunset with the palm trees, and it's got the lines through it, dude. Yes. Yeah, if I could, I'd probably buy that shirt and wear that. But yes, that is what I was thinking of when we built that color.
I love it, man. I love it. So I was going to ask you, and I don't want to keep you too long, man. You've been so generous with your time. But so tell me, your process of, so you're bringing up colors. What's the process of determining this? Okay, so you got that action right, and that's a huge deal, obviously, with lure. But now, how do you determine what colors you're going to come out with?
I'm going to grab something off my wall here. This is fun. Okay, so let's see. We can grab a Money Badger would be fine. I got this right off my wall of, I'm not mounting fish, I'm mounting baits,
Right.
These are trophies for me, right?
Yeah, I like it. A stringer of baits.
Yeah, right. So natural colors. So okay, this is a phenomenal Money Badger color. This one's called Ghost Morning Dawn. This is such a great bait in clear water. It's my go-to walleyes and smallmouth. It is so good. So natural colors, clear water, vibrant colors for dirty water. Here's kind of an OG fire tiger. So,
right on.
I wanted to be able to make a fire tiger that would be bright enough where it catches walleyes good, but the bass guys would fish it. Because part of this thing is we want to develop a crossover bait with bass and walleyes, right? We wanted the bait to be able to be a bait that would transcend both markets, One of my favorites is this.
Like a yellow perch, huh? Yeah, I like that.
But, so natural and then abstract. And then you want to get really, really natural. This is cool. So, again, remember when I said there was that Western black-nosed dace?
Yes.
Right here.
Love that.
But it is on a bait. So I think of if you mounted this or something, right? This is a bait fish that probably no one knew about except for a fisheries biologist guy. I used to catch these in the little creeks growing up, and I fished this exact bait fish, and it caught the smallmouth so good. It's something about this red line, I swear.
Awesome.
Just killed it. We would go off West Lake Okoboji. I would bring specifically these. We would drop them down. My dad and I, we'd catch 20-inch smallmouth all the time. So when I was thinking we were talking about HD colors on flicker shad. So we got all these cool HD colors to bring that next level realism to our baits.
Yep.
So we, I went out to the stream that I went to when I was a kid, and I spent 5 hours, dude, trying to catch one of these elusive Western black-nosed dace. Not even joking. And I finally found him in the stream. It was hard, but I did, and I fell in my waders 5 times. It was hard to do by myself, but I got it.
That's fantastic, man.
I took pictures with believe it or not, my cell phone. I got some dude, iPhones take high quality photos now.
The iPhones are blowing my mind. Just not like I have an iPhone 13. I'm shooting a lot of stuff on Instagram, dude. It is blowing my mind, that phone. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So this bait is now, that fish is now since, it's dead. It's lived its lifespan. I threw it back in the creek after I took the picture, but it lives forever on this flicker shad. Well, at least until we probably drop the color. I hope we don't drop this color. Please buy this color. It's good. It catches them. It's like the secret, you will catch 10 times. No, I'm just kidding. It's just so good.
So you're telling me, and kind of bring that, if you can, a little bit closer. So you're telling me that is the actual image from the lure. Okay? Yep. That is the fish, the minnow that you actually caught.
Yep, it is. And so I took the photo and we applied the artwork to the bait. And then I had to work on the back color and the belly color and some highlight schemes to get it to be exactly that bait fish that caught all those fish. And, okay, here's an example right here. Here's a yellow perch that I actually caught. And I took a picture on the ice of this yellow perch. It was a 13 and a 3/4 inch yellow perch from Dry Lake number 2 in South Dakota. And
it is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool, right? So
I love that story. I would have never. So that's wild.
Yeah, here's a bluegill I caught off. I caught a bluegill off the dock one day and put the bluegill on there. Where's another cool one that? Here's
You're
a fat
catching those bait fish.
Yeah. That's part of the art, right? Here's a fathead minnow that I took from the Fisherman's Factory outlet across the store. So. Yeah, and we got all kinds of stuff.
That is so kick-ass, dude. Like, you know what? So earlier you were talking about how you had thought about like art school. Is that correct? I
was going to go to school for art, and a family trip down in Florida, and some dude was out at Key West selling paintings. I'm like, hey man, that's cool. I'd like to go to school for art. And he looks at me. He's like, don't go to school for art. And he really did do it that way, by the way. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, listen, man, this is fun and it was fun to do, but I'm scraping by, living here kind of off on my own and living the street life, trying to sell my paintings for X amount of dollars. And he's like, get a real job, go to school for something different. And my dad, he was a county conservation officer for 25 years in Northwest Iowa in Osceola County. And he really instilled that passion for the outdoors in me at an early age. So that's kind of why it was always in the back of my mind that I was going to want to go to school for like fisheries and wildlife. So my undergrad was wildlife and fisheries sciences at South Dakota State. And then at South Dakota State, I ended up getting a fisheries emphasis, graduated there with a minor in journalism also. And then I'm like, I got to go to grad school. I want to be set apart and go get that master biologist position, right? So I went and did that, and like I said, I was a fraction away from being a state level biologist working out in Pierre, South Dakota, and that would have been cool too. But I don't think my wife really wanted to live out there. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. The river fishery is great, but there's not much there. I love it here. I grew up here. In the end, I always wanted to live here. If there were ever remote South Dakota pier fishing out in like Webster, South Dakota, I would like that too, but there's not going to be. So, that's just one of those things where, I do have a tendency to go back to a lot of those lakes that I fished in college, fished Minnesota lakes, fish all over, testing baits, and it's super fun.
So when as far as, and I feel this way when I'm walking around, tackle shops, especially nowadays, it was probably, I want to say when lures started getting very detailed, hooks were getting very sharp. I used to fish in the San Francisco Bay, and I would fish for sharks. I was bottom fishing with squid and fishing. Catching bat rays and leopard sharks, smooth hound sharks. I was catching all those species, and I remember going into a tackle shop there to get some squid, some frozen squid, and seeing these hooks, these gamakatsu hooks, and they were
Right.
so freaking sharp, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, what the hell are the Japanese doing? These hooks are like, it's crazy. There wasn't anything like it, you know? And that was like, I want to say that was the early 90s.
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, and then you know, it was the Pointer 100 was when people were like, oh yeah, you can actually charge $15 for a lure and people will buy it, you know.
I know what you mean. I bought a lot of Pointer 100s in college. You know, still got them. I got all kinds of different competitor baits and that I've kept through the years. I mean, I don't sell them. I keep them, and it's like, what am I going to do with them? I appreciated those baits for that time. I'm going to obviously fish the baits that I work on. Like you said earlier, you nailed it. When you can create something and you can fool the fish, and you can say, hey, I worked on this bait and the team and I built this cool bait and it helped catch a fish. There's no more rewarding experience than that. And then also hearing like other people catch fish or winning tournaments, or their kid caught the biggest fish of their life on the bait that you helped develop.
Absolutely.
That is the ultimate reason that I'm here. And I'll also mention too, anytime I see a kid fishing, if I got baits in my truck that I even personally bought, I will bring them to the kid and I will give them to that kid.
That's fantastic. I just think that, you know, lures have become, I guess this was what my point was, is that, you know, it kind of maybe started then, you know, in the early 90s when just getting dialed, but also I would say lures, maybe that was the beginning of really, and I don't mean to be cheeseball when I say this, but kind of like it's an art form too. I mean, I would say that there was lure designers before like the Pointer 100 and whatnot, that there was art there, you know. But I would say without a doubt, you walk in a tackle shop now, and not only are you getting, you know, science, but you're getting art. And it's like, and that is the case with obviously with Berkley and what you're doing.
Right. So, you know, I just pulled this off my bookshelf, you know. Again, I'm not pitching anything about this book, but this is just an example. There's a lot of bait designs that have been, that have come through time. And there's some interesting ideas. A lot of ideas here are really weird ideas from like, you know, again, this one's 1940 to present, but I also collect antique lures. There's a lot of really cool ideas that maybe they were around and they were popular and then they went away, or maybe they never had the chance to become popular. But there's some interesting, ingenious ideas that have been out there that people don't even know. Like there's a lot of what comes around goes around with this industry. You see a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of stuff looks similar. Not everything's the same, but that's just, I thought that was cool. And like this bait, I think it was this bait right here. You know, these big O's.
Oh yeah, that's a big O. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the stuff that, you know, that guy then designed that bait, and that was actually pretty unique to that guy's hand carved design. That was the precursor to all shallow, fat bodied crankbaits and square billed crankbaits that are ever popular and that guys fish. People don't even give it a second thought. Every tackle company has a shallow crankbait and a deep crankbait and a jerkbait, right? But that actually came from that guy. And I've done a lot of research trying to understand like who did what, when, and where it was. And I think it's interesting to see that stuff. I enjoy dipping back in time and looking at these things. And you know, it's just neat. So I like to look upon those guys, and I think about, you know, someday I would like to be known in the industry to have done a bait that stands the test of time, or maybe did that. So
I would say you're definitely on track.
I'm going to say there's some stuff coming that's in the works that I think people are going to be blown away. Berkley, you know, I want to be a leader in this industry with design and the technical element of a bait and the functionality of a bait. And I think there's a couple baits that are going to be coming out down the pipeline, and I think people are going to be blown away by them. I truly do. They're next level I think that they're really, really cool designs, and I'm super excited. But that's all I can say is there's just stuff coming in the future, right?
Awesome.
Without giving stuff away. But I just keep your eyes open on Berkley. We're going to always be cranking out new, innovative, creative designs. We're going to have tried and true variants of historical things too, like baits that have been out there before too,
Sure.
Just like you see out there in the market today, a lot of different things have been around. So I look at it like there's a billion poppers out there, right? I don't know who made the first popper. Actually, in this book, there's zillions going back to the 1940s. I don't know who made the very first one. I don't even know if it's documented. The original person probably won't get credit, but there's a lot of different ways to build these baits and make them better. And so when I look at a bait, I'll just tell you that we want to make it the best we can every time, as the team here at Berkley would try to achieve. So
that's I want to touch on just a few more things. I don't want to keep you much longer, but I really appreciate your time. But you're a fascinating conversationalist. And I could honestly, but you've been very, very generous, and I really appreciate it. I just want to wrap up two more baits, and I know you've got a lot more, but the flicker minnow came after the flicker shad. And there's that in Fire Tiger there. So what was like the development? What was the thinking with that particular lure?
Okay, so this bait makes me smile because this was really that first hard bait that, stepping into this role, I got to quarterback this one, from the design side with the team and working with Gary and Keith from scratch, right? So the flicker shad was before me, and I just kind of tacked on the end of it. But this was the start of me working here. And, I look at that bait and I see a lot of things that I'm super proud of this bait. Obviously I probably designed it different today just because, to me, it's a little dated looking for what we're developing now. But man, is it a fish catching machine, and it's not going anywhere because it's proven time and time again. It's one of the best deep stick baits on the market. And we wanted to have a complement to the shad bait. We wanted to have a minnow or a smelt body form. It's actually, we had up on the screen a smelt body form and an emerald shiner, and we wanted to build the flicker action using that flicker development model of hard bait development into a deep minnow stick bait. So there was some out there in the market, and ours is a lot different than those. Some had lazier actions and different actions that, I would put the flicker minnow as more of a high octane tight action bait. But while developing it, a funny story, and Gary Parsons tells it sometimes, it was like the flicker mistake. Keith Kavais tells it too. We were developing this bait and we got down the road, and the number 9 was the first size we did. And we followed up with the 7 and the 5 and then the 11. Number 9 was first. And actually the prototypes, I was just getting the final production molds. We had them all dialed in. The baits would last 2 or 3 fish on the fragile prototypes, but we knew enough from putting it out there that how much they were biting the bait in limited time out there that it was right. So working with the factory, getting the bait dialed in production with the 2 body halves, getting it welded and all that. One of the little 130 diameter lead balls, dude, 130 diameter lead ball. Think of a 1/4 of an inch, 125. We're talking just a hair over a quarter. Oh, sorry, an 1/8 of an inch. My mistake. An 1/8 of an inch. Just teeny tiny ball. It actually moved maybe a centimeter in the chamber, and it got stuck. And we had a prototype, and some came with that, and some came where the ball was where it was supposed to be in its original position. And some, when they welded the bait, it moved to the other position. And it ended up being side by side. The fish preferred, they selected the one that was the ball rolled to the wrong spot. So
no kidding.
A little mistake, but the bait was already dialed. It would have been a great bait regardless, right? But that was just a funny story, is the one we ended up approving happened to have the ball moved out of the position that we spec'd that I had in where it was supposed to be. It just rolled out of there. And so anyway, actually the number 5 flicker minnow, it doesn't get the love, but that is the most productive. If you troll a number 5 flicker minnow, you won't regret it. It's the most impressive catch rate. Like, it will catch numbers beyond any other bait I've trolled. Like, anywhere I go, I put a number 5 flicker minnow if I troll. I don't troll as much anymore. I mostly cast. I love casting crankbaits and jigs and jerk baits and whatever I'm working on. But I do troll from time to time again, and between the number 5 flicker minnow and probably the money badger, those are my go-tos right now. But
right on.
Flicker minnow was cool. It won that tournament. It won an NWT tournament, and it was like the most hyped bait, hard bait we had at that time. There were people mad that they couldn't get that tournament, and they finished the tournament so high. I think it was like 1, 2, and 5th place, maybe in a 4th place mixed in there. I think Tommy Kimos got it too, and he wasn't with us then, but I think he got 3rd or 4th place. So
I love
guys,
Tommy, man. I've worked with Tommy a lot. Tommy's fantastic.
Tommy is awesome. I love these guys, but so guys were mad they couldn't get them. There were people literally mad that they couldn't get these baits, and then it wasn't going to launch, and then people got mad at us. But dude, the hype was real, and the sales were like it was awesome. That hype.
That's killer.
But proving it out there, and now that bait won back-to-back NWT championships, but I think it won another one. So I think, and then we won. I think we won 3 NWT championships on the flicker minnow. So when I think of it, I always think of it as we build baits to win championships, build baits so that anybody can fish them, but it's all driven around the story of the fish. The fish have the final say. They tell us they like it better than anything else that's out there. It's going to win tournaments. It's going to be great for the average weekend warrior, local guy who wants to fish, the guides, and then it's going to be great for kids. I want to be able to have the bait. Like, kids can go out and catch a ton of fish with our baits, and it's so easy. A kid can use it, and I want to recruit the kids to fishing. There's a whole human dimension to the world of fisheries. SDSU taught me that, by the way. Right. That wasn't a plug for SDSU, by the way. But I love my time at SDSU. But there's a whole human dimension, and we need to do our jobs, whether you're a fisheries biologist, a pro fisherman, a lure designer. We need to keep it moving and instill that passion in the outdoors, because they are the future. And why not build baits to help hook kids on fishing, because they had a great experience. And in the end, that's why I'm here. I think I was put on the earth to help the kids get in the outdoors and live that world of the outdoors and fishing. So that's what I want to do. That's why I think I'm so driven with baits.
Well, when I was, I love that. And when I was a kid, what I loved throwing probably more than anything was a spinnerbait. So a spinnerbait really, like, that was like the, when I first caught a fish on a spinnerbait, I was like, oh my Lord. And so it's a nice segue into this particular bait right here.
Yep. Oh man.
And
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, so and what I love about this spinnerbait that is so different than any other spinnerbait is that it's got that skirt that's made of power bait. And I don't need to go into the power bait deal again, but that's a great looking bait. And obviously there's all kinds of different blade options there. This is the single Colorado, but that's a fantastic looking lure.
Right. Yep. So I pulled one off the back here because I was kind of hoping you'd want to talk about this bait, but this is the Berkley Power Blade. We developed it with Edwin Evers. This was an awesome project, awesome guy to work with, really, really knows his spinnerbaits. I think he helped us dial in the best spinnerbait on the market today. I will go out there and I will firmly say that I think it's the best on the market. And it's everything he learned from fishing spinnerbaits put into this bait. And I grew up fishing spinnerbaits too. So again, it's like the Hank Cherry thing. I feel like I have a very great background on spinnerbaits, fishing them in a lot of different ways. He takes it up to the nth degree. But, when we developed this, there's actually 2 models. This is the shad regular standard model, shad style head design. There's a compact model. I don't have it right here, but it's got a bullet head. So it's got a smaller wire form. So the compact's got a bullet head, smaller wire form, and it has different blades. So you can burn it and it gets through like vegetation like no other. And it's like that compact burner, small profile spinnerbait. Like, so when they're on like the shad spawn, finesse style spinnerbait. I love those. These standard ones, bigger wire form profile, shad style head, more of a tradition, but high end detail and finish. Like if I put this up there, I don't know if you can see that,
Absolutely.
but like
Yep.
next level detail, head design and all that. Premium componentry from the top to the bottom. So, we have a conical bait keeper that helps you keep the trailer on. We have an extended long shank hook. No one else on the market has this. We built this Fusion 19. We were able to build this ourselves. We actually lengthened this. So no need for a trailer hook. I've always fished spinnerbaits with trailer hooks, and then you can't just easily rig your soft bait on there.
Yep.
Here you have the benefit of the trailer hook, and you can still rig a soft bait on there. So that is a huge benefit. That idea came directly from Edwin Evers.
Love that.
The wire form has just the perfect amount of flex but rigidity for the ultimate vibration. So, and then we designed these very unique flattened blades, they're semi-cut, but they're flattened. They have a very particular specific vibration. So think of this, we had to dial each one of these models in with the right blades and actions, just like we do the hard baits. It was exactly that, but Berkley hard baits meets spinner baits, right? So the blades send the vibration through the wire form. Best in class swivels, so like premium ball bearing swivels. Like, I don't know if you can see that spinning.
Oh yeah.
But it'll just keep spinning, and I could blow on this and it could spin. And that is an important part of spinner baits. So many times you get them and they don't have that premium ball bearing that the blade turns at the speed it needs to turn at. So you pair all this together and you blend it together, and the tried and true combinations. Edwin had me making at the factory different blade sizes that had never been developed before in Willow and Colorado and Indiana blades. We did tweener sizes, like there's 3, 3.5, 4, right? That's the normal scaling. We went like 3, 3.25, 3.5, 3 3/4, 4 1/4. We tried every size of blade you could think of and put them on these baits, and then we tested it head to head. We field tested them. We tested them in the lab to feel they have certain actions that we were looking for. We did all that. And plus, you have a hand-tied skirt, so it stays in place. And then a premium power bait skirt, man. You know me with the power bait now through this call or this podcast, is that I'm a huge fan of power bait. We put that power bait scent technology in the strands. So, these are moving baits, but when that fish bites it, it's going to get that proven power bait scent in a track that we have built from the ground up from the 1980s. So, you see a lot of that, scent and flavor ingredients and stuff that is in our baits. And, why not put it in a bait skirt?
Absolutely.
In jigs, in our jigs too.
That's awesome. What is it like to work so hard on these lures and put so much of your blood, sweat, and tears into the development of these lures, and then see them actually on the shelves? That's got to be a tremendous feeling.
Yeah, it's probably as rewarding as catching fish on them. I'd say number one is catching fish and making a bait, is going to be a winner for the reasons I explained earlier. The next thing is seeing them on shelf and being like, hey, look at this. This is something that I spent a lot of time on working on with the team, and we got this from a concept idea that was floating around in our heads to drawn hand sketches on a piece of paper, and then we drew it up in CAD, and then we built models and prototypes, and we proved it on the fish, and then we built it out of production molds, and then we put it in a package, and it's on the shelf. And nothing more rewarding than that. I'd say that, and winning things like, having a bait win the classic was probably the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Man, I still I was watching that whole thing unfold. I couldn't actually be in the Classic that year. I forget why. I was going to go, and then for some reason I didn't get to go. There was something going on, family thing. Maybe one of my kids was, about being born or something. I don't know. But I didn't make that Classic. I wish I had. That would have been it was surreal just to watch it on like the Bass Live. But,
yeah.
I think the cool thing for me next is, I got 3 kids at home. I got an awesome wife, awesome family. My boy Maverick, he's really getting into fishing. My daughter, she's really liking it. And I want to instill that passion in them. Maverick is already making lures at home. One day he's like, Dad, I made this bait. It was awesome. Right.
Oh, that's killer.
That's neat. So that's probably the next thing for me is I want my kids to be able to go catch fish on baits that I'm working on. And, right now they're pretty good bath toys. They work as long as you take the hooks off.
Yeah. What would you tell a young person, that was interested, that's eaten up with fishing? What would you tell them if they wanted to pursue a career in fishing?
Okay, I love this. I will say, follow your dreams. You don't have to be an engineer or a designer to get this job. I'm a fish biologist, and I work and develop baits and design baits for the world's largest fishing tackle company. That is proof right there. I mean, coming from a person that liked art in high school, liked developing my own baits, whittling things out of wood by hand, fishing for fun. If you like to fish and you like to build fishing lures, you don't have to go to college to be an engineer. You just don't. And, Kyle, our soft bait designer too, he didn't go to school for this. I think there's a lot of neat things that can be learned from the Berkley Research Labs facility of different people coming together with different backgrounds, but you don't need that degree to be a bait designer at a high level company. And I'm proof of that. And I am dedicated, and you just have to have the passion and the drive and the love for fishing. And you want to have that will for success, and you want to be able to work with a team and build that relationship to build some of the best, most coolest baits out in the market today. So that's what I say when I'm doing seminars, and that's what I say to anybody who asks me. And that's why any kid who wants to ask me about it, I will give them a fishing lure. One kid, dude, this was the coolest thing ever. A kid writes me a letter, and I actually felt bad because it got in the mailbox for a month, but they had to research somebody that inspired them. And he found me on the internet on a video talking about how this was my dream job, building lures. He said his favorite bait was a Choppo, hand wrote me a letter. I think he was like, I want to say 11 or 12, and wrote me a letter. And I sent him a Hank Cherry signed Stunna, and I sent him and his whole class a bunch of Berkley baits, just because that meant a lot to me as a person to get that. But also I realize what it means for them to get that, and to realize that that matters, and that I'm sure he wasn't expecting it, but man, did that feel good to send that. And then the teacher called me, said that basically the teachers were crying when he gave that to the class and gave his presentation. And that means the world to me. And all the kids got the baits, and they all took pictures with holding up the baits, the Berkley baits. That's cool. That's the ultimate.
That is, I love it. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I still feel like a kid. I mean, you should always try to feel like a kid, yeah. I think when you're passionate, you always kind of feel like a kid, and yeah. I remember just as, as a youngster, and opening and getting an In Fisherman magazine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was like, oh my, I mean, I can't even describe it really, or the Bass Pro Shops master catalog, that thick,
God. Yeah.
And it was like, yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. No. I mean, it was like, to me, it was, it was the ultimate. And so to be able to remember how you felt, when everything was so new too, and you're learning so much, you're trying to absorb so much in this world of fishing, and I remember meeting my first fishing celebrity and how I felt, all those feelings, so it's like, yeah, if you can help to make kids feel that way, and I think that's absolutely wonderful, and I really applaud you for that.
Thanks. Well, they're the future.
Yeah, and the future looks bright, and I love seeing all these kids, into fishing and walking around with Bass Pro Shops hats. It's like, I don't know if they even fish or if it's a fashion thing, but I'm fine. It's cool. You're still walking around with a Bass Pro Shops hat. So,
well, they make fun of us for wearing these hats that have the bends, right?
That's something. I know. I'm sorry, but I can never just flatten this out. This hat is a little big for my head. I kind of have a small head, but yeah, no, I'm not a I was born in 75. I just figured out you're not even 40.
No,
you're not even 40 yet. So yeah, okay. Well, anyway, Dan, it has been beyond awesome talking with you. Dude, this is beyond what my hopes. I knew it was going to be cool, but this is even cooler than I thought it was going to be. I love the stories. Fishing, there's so many cool things about fishing, the being out in nature, just experiencing. To me, it's like you're plugging into nature, and really humans need to have nature. We came from nature. Fishing plugs me back into nature, but it has so many other elements to it. It has art to it. Just what you're doing. I say it's art. It's art. It's got science. It's fun. And so I see your passion. I get wound up. It's through osmosis, just talking with you. We are passionate guys. We were lucky we found our passion in fishing, and it's just been a pleasure talking with you, man. I really appreciate you taking. We've never met before. This is the first time we've talked. And it feels like I've known you forever. So thanks.
I know. Same.
I mean, you need to get to your wife and kids. You're still at work, for goodness sakes. But it means a lot to me that you took the time to do this podcast. And
thanks for having me.
Thanks again, dude.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Dude, I love the work you do. Videos you have with the pros are really, really cool. I love seeing that stuff. So you got a really sweet gig too. So obviously that you enjoy. And again, if we're sharing this information and what angling is, and it's just another way that we can express and share our love for the great outdoors.
Absolutely. And I think Berkley, with your help, of course, is knocking it out of the park. So it's been a real pleasure. And let's try to, I say this all the time, but I swear I mean it. I kind of feel like I come back from shoots and then I kind of become like a recluse, and I might just fish by myself, but I really need to start fishing with people more, and you're ever in my neck of the woods, I'm near, Minneapolis. I would love to fish with you. If I'm down there, I'll hit you up, but let's, heck, we've worked with the same people a lot. We definitely need to get in a boat together. So just, thanks again, Dan. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.